So the Trailblazer League is finally about to come to a close. I definitely had a lot of fun playing the league, and it makes me really excited for the next one. That said, there are definitely some things that I saw during the league that I think could be improved upon, as well as some things that went really well that I think should be implemented in the next league as well. So I just wanted to make this video to go over my thoughts on the league and get a feel for what I thought went well and what I thought didn't go so well. So first off, the relics. There are definitely some things that were left to be desired in the relic design this time around, and I definitely feel like some people weren't very happy with their picks by the end of the league. I was, however, quite happy with my picks. I went with Endless Harvest, Eternal Jeweler, Double Cast, Clue Relic, Equilibrium, and Exploding Attacks. Going tier by tier here, I think the first tier was nearly perfectly designed. It was also one of the first bits of information that was given to us, so it was really nice to theorize where each of the specific relics would be useful. The only change I would make here is that Production Master definitely should have included glass blowing. I know Jagex has said they agree with that, and it was just a concern about dev time because it was difficult to make it work with every single interaction, but that is a very crucial thing that is used to get crafting up on Iron Man mode, so it was definitely a huge oversight, and I would have really loved to see it work on crafting. For the second tier, I actually thought there was a very interesting trade-off to be made between Eternal Jeweler and Last Recall. I know a lot of people like to meme that Last Recall was the only pick here, but I really think Eternal Jeweler was useful to me at many points of my account. The only time I really wish I would have had Last Recall was for the rune crafting grind. It would have sped it up by double, and that's one of the longest grinds if you're going for max. So that said, if you weren't going for max and you were just kind of trying to explore the game mode, I really think Eternal Jeweler was a reasonable pick. Specifically, I found Eternal Jeweler to have a really great synergy with running around completing tasks, as well as completing clue scrolls, which is a thing that I did twice during the league. That said, there are a couple things I would have liked to see Eternal Jeweler get. One of those was it should have worked on the Burning Amulet, definitely an oversight there. I also think it probably should have given everyone a Master Scroll book with every scroll already in it, as that fits the theme of it being an item that allows you to get to unique areas quickly and as often as you like. And it wound up meaning that you had to go get a fairly rare item from clue scrolls in order to unlock one of the most powerful parts of that relic. If it wasn't for the Master Scroll book, runecrafting would have taken me even longer, as well as plank make and other things. I also think that I'm personally downplaying Last Recall a little bit as I had Endless Harvest, and one of the other main benefits about Last Recall is very quick banking when collecting things. However, Fairy's Flight was definitely one that should have gone back to the drawing board. That relic was just not useful, and honestly the people that picked it seem to have regretted it. The only real benefit of it seemed to be that it allowed you to teleport anywhere in the wilderness, which was a pretty unique but unintended interaction with that relic. I'm not really sure how this could have been reworked. One idea I had is maybe it should have been an item that gave you unlimited uses of every single teletablet in the game. That would have been pretty cool and also been unique enough from Eternal Jeweler, while also still being kind of in the vein of allowing you to get around the game very quickly, but not necessarily to one location very quickly like Last Recall. So going on to the third tier, I actually found all these relics to be pretty well designed. I wound up going for Double Cast, and I don't have any regrets there. It allowed me to shake up a lot of metas that you typically use in the main game, and use magic in a lot of places it typically wouldn't be viable, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I do wish each of the three relics did something a little bit more unique with the combat benefit rather than just all the attacks being half speed and more accuracy and damage. There could have been something a little bit more unique to make each one have some more upsides and downsides. One thing I was thinking is, instead of Double Cast having half attack speed for magic, you could instead have it hit twice with every cast at regular speed. It's not a huge difference, but it does definitely impact how you use that relic because it allows you to kind of like run around a little bit more, hit harder in one go, and that kind of stuff. The last thing I'll say about the third tier is I thought Fluid Strikes was a touch OP with the damage reduction and HP regen built in, specifically because the HP regen stacked with the regen bracelet allowed you to heal a lot of health passively. And of course, with melee being one of the highest DPS options in the game, that damage reduction just seemed to be like extra unnecessary buffs to it. I think it's pretty obvious that the fourth tier needed work. It's really unfortunate that the double inventory option wasn't available. I think that would have been very interesting, though there is an anti-synergy there with Endless Harvest for sure. However, I think that Unnatural Selection was the complete winner here in terms of usefulness. That relic allowed you to be able to get access to so much more content that was locked through Slayer, which is a surprisingly high amount of content. I completely underestimated how hard it would be to get access to some of the items that are locked behind Slayer tasks, because I didn't realize just how few Slayer tasks I would be doing in regards to the League. I thought I would be doing a lot more. Typically in the main game, you would expect to be getting a lot of these tasks to get the items passively. I was actually extremely fortunate to be able to get a Trident shortly after 87 Slayer. That was an item that made my account so much more powerful, and I was completely at the mercy of the Slayer Masters there. I saw other people who picked Clue Seeker that got locked out of Kraken tasks for the entire rest of the League because they weren't lucky enough to get a task. I also never saw another Kraken task beyond the one that got me the Trident, which is a big deal. If I didn't get that Trident on that task, I wouldn't have one, and I wouldn't be able to do half the stuff that I did. I also got locked out of Cerberus uniques, which is really unfortunate, though they weren't the most beneficial to my build. That said, I do think that Treasure Seeker had its unique position, and I definitely enjoyed doing the clue scrolls that I got to do. And it sort of makes me not regret picking it because I did get lucky on those very crucial Slayer items. If I wouldn't have, I would have seriously regretted it. However, I would have liked to see Treasure Seeker be just a little bit more powerful to really make you consider it if you want to use that versus an unnatural selection, because clue scrolls give you a lot of good equipment and alchables that could be useful for the progression of your account. Some ideas that I had were potentially adding extra loot rolls per each casket, maybe 1 or 2 depending on tier, just so that the loot gets a lot better. Or maybe have clue scrolls have a chance at dropping an item that allows you to use it on a clue scroll to get an instant casket. Or maybe even just allow clue scrolls to be dropped as caskets so you don't have to do the clues at all, and instead reduce the drop rate back to normal rates. However, I'm not super a big fan of that one because I actually enjoy doing clue scrolls, and it would remove that piece of the content for me. It probably would make opening caskets not quite as fun. On to the 5th tier, I do think Botanist here was definitely the clear winner and a little overpowered compared to the others. However, I do think the others had their unique places and niches. And that's kind of the most important thing I want to try to emphasize as part of this, is that I do think that you should allow organic metas to appear and not necessarily have every relic to be equally good and expect every relic tier to have equal selections across all players. There's going to be one that's going to be a little bit more popular no matter how you wing it. However, I do think the niches that the others provide need to be good enough to be justifiable. I think the 5th tier is a good example of that. Botanist was very popular, obviously, because it removed a lot of the grinding for those potions and allows you to train farming and herb lore a lot faster, which are pretty hard skills to train on in Iron Man. Jagex has already acknowledged this, but I do think the non-draining stat perk shouldn't have applied to combat stats, just non-combat, and that's some feedback that they've already taken into account. With that tweak, I think it would have been absolutely perfect. And I think Infernal Gathering is a perfect example of that kind of niche use where, like, it is great if your playstyle fits how it would use. I saw some people knock out the 25 million gold tasks, which is a really hard thing to do in the League, using Endless Harvest and Infernal Gathering on rune rocks to get lots of rune bars. Also, depending on your region, smithing could have been one of the hardest skills to max out if you're going for max. So similar to how Botanist gave you a herb lore buff, getting that smithing buff may have been extremely relevant to your account. Because the design of the relic was pretty good, I do wish it did it a little bit better. That is to say, I wish it had some sort of small buff to that specific niche. I think maybe it would have been greater to make the tools better than crystal tools, like some new imaginary tier above crystal, or maybe even just allow them to mine fish and cut wood as fast as possible. So like every single thing, no matter what you're cutting or fishing or mining, you get it on the fastest tick you could get it. And finally, Equilibrium. Without this relic, I don't think I would have even potentially had a chance to max because the extra experience was so critical for me getting to max. However, I do think that this relic was a little boring at the end of it. I was pretty excited to try out methods where you have to weigh faster experience ticks versus experience overall, but they didn't really come up at all like I was expecting. Almost every single experience interaction, I would just do the same methods I was going to do anyway. I just got a 5 to 10% experience buff depending on the method. When I initially saw this relic, I thought it actually put that bonus experience into your lowest skill, and that would have been far more interesting. Now, it may have needed to be balanced and be a little bit less experienced than 1/10th your total level, maybe like 1/50th or something. However, this would have put you in very interesting situations where you have to consider if it's worth training your slowest skills by leaving them as your lowest skill and then doing some very high activity, high experience method in another skill to train it. For example, I had the ability to get ridiculous amounts of experience in my melees and combats by doing maniacal monkey training with my exploding attacks. It would have been really cool if I could have trained my runecrafting that way and see if it's faster than training runecrafting manually, or even just get the passive experience by doing something entirely unrelated. Would have been really good fun. So there was definitely a large missed potential there on Equilibrium. A good relic overall. I'm happy I picked it, but it just turned out to be pretty boring. And finally, the 6th tier. I do think all 3 of the relic options here were very viable and very well designed. I do think that Draining Strikes was the quote-unquote boring relic here, kind of like Equilibrium. It didn't really change anything you did, it just made you better at it, and that's fine. I mean, it turned out to be extremely useful for the people who had it, whereas the other 2 relics I think were more utility in specific situations, but they allowed you to have some pretty good times. I definitely really enjoyed exploding attacks, and it turned out to be another reason why I was potentially able to max, because of the extra experience I got via maniacal monkeys. I do think that it could have used a buff to maybe work on non-multi-combat areas similar to a cannon, where if you can stay out of combat with the thing you're fighting, it'll still splash on nearby enemies. I say that because really the main multi-combat Slayer area in the game is Catacombs of Corrin, which was not accessible. I also wish it would have been changed in some way to be easier to splash against monsters that are bigger than 1 tile. I learned through my progress that if you can get those monsters right on top of each other and get their primary southwest tile lined up, you can still splash attacks. But that doesn't work outside of specific boss encounters like Dagonoth Kings and God Wars. The monsters just don't walk over each other, they're designed not to do that. It wound up basically providing almost no benefit to my Slayer except for a very couple specific tasks, which was really unfortunate, and that was one thing I was really looking forward to. It would have been great to just blow through Slayer. I was kind of looking for a, like, RuneScape 3 everywhere is multi-combat and you have AoE attacks kind of experience there, and it just didn't happen. Weapon Specialist, on the other hand, was one of the relics I really enjoyed watching other people take and see what they could do with their special attack weapons. It had the unique property in that it was a relic that gave you very little benefit until you were able to actually get those endgame special attack weapons. But once you had them, it was just amazing fun to watch people go fire off like 5 Armadillo specials or whatever they had. And I just think that was really good design to have a relic that was like something that you had to build up to, but once you got there, it was extremely powerful. So definitely in conclusion to the relics, I loved my relic picks. I probably would have gone for Unnatural Selection over Clue Seeker, otherwise I was really satisfied. Most tiers were really well designed. A couple tweaks I would have liked to see made here or there, and the only one that really stood out as bad was Fairy's Flight. It could have just been completely reworked, and I feel sorry for the people who picked it. On to the next major concept of this league, and that was the regions. I think the world was divided up in a way that made great sense because of each of the thematic regions that were selected. And also I do think it was going to be impossible for all regions to have like a pretty equal usefulness and thereby a player pick rate. The game is not designed in that way, and without moving around tons of content in confusing ways, that was never going to happen. So I'm not surprised that some regions only got like a 2 or 3% pick rate. I think that makes a lot of sense. For the people that wanted to try that specific content, it was there, but for the people who are looking for a more broad experience using regions that provided more benefits, that was also there. That's just kind of how RuneScape is designed. There is one major change I would have made to the regions though, and that was that I would have made Kandarin the default auto unlock and not Karamja. Kandarin is a region that just provides so much content and locks you out of so much if you don't pick it, that I think it's obvious that basically everyone picked it as one of their 3 regions. And at the end of the day, I think Karamja still would have been a very popular pick because of the Inferno being one of the biggest PVM challenges that people want to try. However, otherwise, I don't think it's the most interesting region, and having Kandarin right off the bat would have been much better. The next thing I want to talk about is the task system. I think it was very well designed. I think that Jagex put a lot of thought into all of the tasks that they put in there. I think they progressed very nicely, and it was really fun to knock them out from 1 to 1, especially in the early game. There were a couple standout moments where tasks just didn't seem to make any sense or were kind of duplicates of each other. A couple points I remember thinking that are like, when I pickpocketed a guard in Varrock, I got 2 tasks, pickpocket a guard and a Varrock guard. With Varrock being in the starting region, it didn't make sense to have both. You were pretty much always going to do that anyway. In addition to that, there was a 10-point task to kill the Lesser Demon in the Wizard's Tower, but also a 50-point task to just kill a Lesser Demon anywhere. If that Lesser Demon's in the starting region anyway, like, yeah, that's the lesser demon you're probably going to kill, so those tasks were just entirely redundant. I do also think that once you had all the relics unlocked, the late game tasks were very interesting and pretty well defined. There was a lot of time associated with some of them, so there was some waiting that you had to put in order to decide which relics you were going to go for, especially if you're playing competitive. However, the flip side to that is I think the mid-game was quite grindy, specifically when I was on my way to my final region and on my way to my final last 2 relics. I remember thinking there were some times where I had to engage in content that I would have really preferred to have my final relics for, but I had no choice but to do that in order to get the tasks to actually unlock them. I think it would have been better if there was more 50 and 100 point tasks that were just kind of middle of the road, things that are fairly easy to get. Wouldn't have required any other adjusting, just would have been a little easier to get those final unlocks. The last thing I want to comment on in regards to tasks is that some regions very much suffered in terms of task completion if you didn't have specific other regions. The example I'm thinking of here is that Fremennik, if you didn't have Kandarin, has a lot of content that gets locked out. For example, you can't complete the Cold War quest unless you also have Kandarin. And if you can't complete the Cold War quest, you can't complete the Troll quest to unlock Whis, which is one of your herb patches, and also locks, I think, 3 tasks out as well, which is a lot of points. It just was kind of weird that there were certain tasks that they were working around, specifically achievement diaries, where they were making sure they were completable just in the region and auto-completing a bunch of stuff for you to make sure that happens, where all other regions suffered because you had to have specific combinations of regions to get a lot of these tasks done. I do know Jagex wanted this to happen for some tasks to make you evaluate which regions you wanted to go with, especially as you were unlocking them through the league. However, I think some regions suffered drastically versus other regions that were mostly completable with nothing else. For example, I've heard the desert was pretty much completable entirely in the desert, and you didn't necessarily need to pick any other regions. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the competitive side of the league. I didn't think I would participate at all in the competition, but near the end here, I'm pretty glad with my positioning. I should be in the Rune tier, which I'm pretty happy with. However, it does make me a bit sad to know that even though I put in pretty much every spare moment I had over the last 2 months, because of where I am in life, having 2 young children, working a full-time job, I wasn't able to ever effectively compete for that dragon tier. I think my relic picks were a good candidate for making me get the fastest points possible, and I still was pretty much just barely able to eke out the Rune tier. Now, by saying that, I'm not trying to say anything bad about people who have a lot more time than me available to play over the course of something like this. I'm just saying I would have preferred to see the competitive side of it be capped on maximum gameplay time. For example, let's say you have 100 hours over the course of the 2 months to be able to play, and then after that, you're locked into whatever point total you had for the competitive aspect of it. However, you're welcome to keep playing and still experience other content that you weren't able to. 100 hours is actually a pretty low estimate for that. It probably should be more like 500 or 600, but I think you understand the point. It definitely makes me think of King of the Skill, which was kind of like the league's beta, where we basically just had buffed experience rates and no relics. That was capped at a 24-hour gameplay time, which was very interesting because I was able to play that, plot out my course, try a couple different accounts through it to get as far as I could, and I was able to compete fairly effectively. Whereas when you have a time-limited mode like this, where it's just 2 months, but you can progress as much as you can within that window, it's always going to favor the people who get to put in the most hours, regardless of strategy or mechanical skill or anything. It kind of removes a lot of the interesting competitive aspects of it because it just becomes a grind fest. I'm definitely still impressed by the people who are able to eke out 50, 60,000 points. That's just amazing to me, and congratulations to those people for sure though. In addition to that, I definitely would have liked to see the 2-month window be expanded longer. However, I do think the 2-month window felt good for the competitive aspect of it. I don't think it should have gone much further. Otherwise, you would be getting to the point, especially with no gameplay time cap, where people just are able to all progress to the same level, and there's just a few tasks left that ekes you out just over the top of everyone. It just wouldn't be very interesting either. However, at least in my experience, I definitely feel like I've finally hit the point where I'm ready to just like try experiencing all the various pieces of content that necessarily weren't worth experiencing because they didn't have tasks associated with them, or maybe the tasks weren't that good points per hour. And I would have liked more time to be able to experience that. So that said, I think it would have been great if Jagex kept the league open for a couple more months, just block off the competitive side of it. Like, after the end of the 2 months, the competitive side is over. You're welcome to keep playing and trying out different things. The other side of that is late into the league, I actually started building a second account where I wanted to go with the more quote-unquote meta relic approach with Fluid Strikes and Mortania, but I wasn't able to progress very far on it, and now the league is going to be over, so I won't be able to at all. And honestly, I was having a blast on that account too. I know Jagex has mentioned they consider opening past versions of leagues without the competition aspect in the future. I think that would be a wonderful idea. The last thing I'll say on the competitive aspect of things is that Jagex should consider releasing the task list and relic lists sooner so that there is more time for speculating and metagaming. I wasn't able to do basically any planning other than my regions and my first relic, and going into the league on the first day, I definitely made a lot of mistakes just because I didn't quite know how things were going to form out. If things were released sooner, we could have talked about it more. There would have been metas that had formed going into it, and I think it would have been a little bit more interesting specifically for the competitive aspect of things. Again, harkening back to King of the Skill, I remember everyone was having a great time, and then all of a sudden right at the end, Wooks actually came out and blasted through the high scores all the way to the top rank 1 because he had taken the time in advance to go through and plot out a course and consider every minute he put into that account to progress it as far as possible in the capped game time. So that sums up the things that I would have liked to see changed with the league and the things that I think were perfect. Again, overall, a blast. I had so much fun. I'm so happy that Jagex released this game mode. I got to experience the game I love in such a different and unique way, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to do for future leagues. But of course, part of this is I hope they're always making sure that they're looking at what worked well, what didn't in the past, and they're working on improving those future leagues so they can be even more fun for everyone involved. That'll be it for me for the leagues in general. Hope you enjoyed my retrospective on the league, and I hope you also had a good time playing it. So I'm actually going to be going on hiatus after this video for quite a while. I'm going to be on vacation for a while, and I also want to use some time to plan out my next series as well as get some footage backlogged so I'll be able to continue to release episodes when that's ready. I expect that the first episode should be dropping sometime around mid to late spring. I'm thinking like April or May, so be on the lookout for that. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's going to be a unique Iron Man series. Snowflake Iron Man indeed. Should be pretty interesting. So if you're interested in that, definitely give the channel a subscription. It means a lot to me. Feel free to comment how your league progress was down below as well, and leave a like on the video if you liked it. As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you in a couple months.